Welcome to our explainer. Today, we're digging into Mankiy's Principles of Economics to answer a really big question. Why are some countries incredibly rich while others are just stuck? Let's get right into it.
So let's just start with this one fact, because it's pretty staggering. The average person in a rich country has about 10 times the income of someone in a poor country. And we're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet here. This is a massive, life-altering difference in healthcare, in education, in opportunity, everything. So what on earth explains this huge gap?
Now, you'd think the answer has to be super complicated, right? A mix of history, culture, geography, politics. And look, all those things play a part. But economists have figured out that the lion's share of this difference comes down to one single, incredibly powerful idea.
And this is it. Productivity. It's that simple. It's just the amount of stuff, goods and services, that a worker can produce in a certain amount of time. That's the whole game. If you want to understand why living standards are so different around the world, you absolutely have to understand what makes one country more productive than another. It's the engine that drives the entire economy. All right, so let's pop the hood on this productivity engine. Let's really see why it is so fundamental to whether a country is rich or poor. This quote from the book really nails it. At the end of the day, a country's income is its output. It's a basic truth. You can't have more than you make. So, if you want to live well as a country, you've got to produce a lot. It's a simple, unbreakable link. Okay, so economists have this kind of secret formula they use to think about all this. It's called the production function. I know it looks a little scary with all the letters, but it's actually pretty simple. All it's saying is that our total output, that's the Y, is basically a function of a few key ingredients, all supercharged by our level of technology, which is A.
So what are these key ingredients in our recipe for economic growth? Let's break down the 4 big ones that determine just how productive a country can be.
First up, we've got physical capital. We call it K. This is, simply put, the tools. Think about it. A farmer with a tractor is going to be way more productive than a farmer with a hoe. A factory with modern robots can produce more than one with old machines. Better tools make for more productive workers. Simple as that. Next, ingredient number 2, human capital, or H. Now, this isn't about the tools in a worker's hands. It's about the knowledge and skills inside their head. It's the education, the job training, the on-the-job experience. A population that's well-educated and well-trained is going to be a highly productive population.
Third on our list is natural resources. N. Stuff that comes from nature. Oil, minerals, fertile land. Now, you might think this is everything. But here's the tryst. It's not destiny. Look at a country like Japan. It has very few natural resources, but it's one of the wealthiest places on Earth. This just proves that the other ingredients on our list are way, way more important.
And finally, we get to A, technological knowledge. Now listen, this is different from human capital, and it's a really important distinction. Human capital is getting the knowledge into people's heads. Technological knowledge is society's collective understanding of the best way to do things. It's the assembly line. It's new software. It's the recipe book that everyone gets to use, making all the other ingredients far more powerful.
Okay, so we've got our recipe for productivity, which leads to the obvious next question. Can we actually make it better? Can we get more of these ingredients? And the answer is a big yes. This is where government and public policy can make a huge difference.
So the most basic way to get more productive in the future is to invest in more physical capital, more tools, more factories, more infrastructure. But, and this is a big but, there's always a trade-off. To build that future stuff, you have to use resources that you could be using to make stuff to enjoy right now. Basically, society has to save more of its income today so it can invest in a richer tomorrow.
But here's the catch. You can't just grow like crazy forever by just piling on more and more capital. There's this crucial economic idea called diminishing returns. It means that the more capital you already have, the smaller the boost you get from adding one more piece of it.
This is the perfect way to think about it. Imagine an office worker who has no computer. Giving them their very first one? Whoa, that's a massive game changer for their productivity. Now, what if you give them a second computer? Maybe it helps a little, for multitasking, but the extra benefit is tiny compared to the first one. That's diminishing returns right there. Now, this idea of diminishing returns, it leads to this really powerful and actually kind of hopeful phenomenon in the world economy. It explains something called the catch-up effect.
So let's tell a quick story. Go back in time to 1960.
You've got the United States, a very rich country, tons of capital for every worker. And you've got South Korea, which was a very poor country with very, very little capital. Now let's say both decide to invest about the same percentage of their income into building new capital. What do you think happened?
Well, the results were just stunning. Between 1960 and 1990, South Korea's economy grew at this blistering pace, over 6% a year. The US, just 2%. Why? Because in Korea, every new factory, every new machine was a monumental upgrade. They were getting huge returns. The US was already so developed, it was getting, well, diminishing returns.
And that is the catch-up effect. It's this powerful idea that if all the other conditions are right, countries that start off poor have the potential to grow much, much faster than countries that are already rich. They can get those massive gains from their first big investments, while rich countries are already on the flatter part of the growth curve.
So what's the government supposed to do with all this information? Well, it gives us a pretty clear playbook for growth. You want to encourage people to save and invest to build up that physical capital. You need to invest in education and healthcare to build up human capital. And just as important, you have to create a stable environment, protecting property rights, allowing free trade, and funding research to push that technological knowledge forward. That's the checklist.
Which brings us to our final and maybe most important question. We have the recipe, we know the ingredients, we know what it takes to create prosperity. So why is it still so hard for so many countries to actually do it? Well, it turns out that having the recipe isn't enough. You also need a functioning kitchen, things like political stability, the rule of law, and institutions you can trust. And often, those are the hardest ingredients of all to get right. Something to think about.